goods and services will be what goods and services will be produced in an economy. Think about this. Economy is a big thing like a country, right? And obviously you need to decide what goods to prioritize on, what is the need of the hour, and so on and so forth, right? So that is what the economic system is about. Just like you need a political system to decide how political decisions will be made, you need an economic system to decide how economic decisions will be made. Now, there are the three fundamental economic questions that need to be answered, right? What are those? What to produce, like what products should be produced in the country, how to produce, meaning what resources should be employed to produce those products, and for whom to produce, which means that the goods that are produced, how should they be distributed amongst the consumers, right? Amongst the citizens. Okay. Now, these are the three fundamental questions that every economic system needs to answer. Now, the interesting part is that as we'll talk about the different type of economic systems in a bit, you will see that the answer to these three questions are different. I repeat, think about this. You will see when we come and talk about each of these three economic systems one by one, right? That the answer to these three questions are different. And you'll see how. And this is exactly what happens, right? So if it's a political system of democracy, then everyone votes above a certain age, I guess 18 years. Everyone votes in the country, and whoever gets the majority vote, that political party or that person gets elected. Like the fundamental of democracies like that. But in monarchy or in kingship, this is not how it happens. So if my father is ruler, then I will become the ruler after he, you know, passes away or things like that. So that is what you need to understand. Just like that, when there's a different political system, decisions are made in a different manner. Similarly, when they're different economic system, the decisions will be made in a different manner. Okay. Now, moving forward, yesterday we just started our discussion about mixed economy, right? So there are three economic systems: free market. We also call it market economy. Then you have mixed economy, and the third and the last is the command economy or planned economy. Now, what is mixed economy? As the word suggests here, it has presence of both public and private sector, right? The public sector produces public goods and the private sector produces public goods. Now, we spent quite some time yesterday to discuss what is the difference between public sector, private sector, and similarly, what is the difference between private goods and public goods. So public sector and private sector is very simple and easy to understand. Any organization, business activity that is owned by the government is public sector, right? And what's the objective of the public sector? So these businesses are focused on social welfare and they're not profit maximizing entities. So they're focused on social welfare and they're not profit maximizing entities. Is this simple? On the other hand, private businesses are owned by individuals. Mega Lecture is a private business. McDonald's is a private business. The car producing companies in your countries are private businesses. The clothes manufacturing businesses are private businesses, right? So what is their aim? Their aim is simply to maximize their profits. As simple as that. Yes or no? Okay. Now, moving forward, we discussed what's the difference between public goods and private goods, right? Now, there are a lot of terms in economics, but once you get familiar with these, then everything will be just a piece of cake, right? Initially, it might take you some time to get used to these terms. Public good. Public good is a product, right, that has these two characteristics. What are the characteristics that public good has? So public goods are non-excludable and non-rivalry. What we mean by non-excludable, we will come in a bit, and non-rivalry. These are the two characteristics that you will think about to decide whether a good is public or private. On the contrary, private good is excludable. You can exclude someone from using it, and it's rivalry, right? Okay. Now, what's the definition of excludability? That's very simple. If any product has clearly defined property rights, my car, my house, your house, it's excludable, right? You can exclude anyone. I can stop someone from using my phone. I can stop someone from using my car because it's my car, my phone, right? But this doesn't happen for other products. Right. Now we will today, let's go over the definitions first, and then let's do a fun exercise so to see how much you have understood that, right? So excludable, you can exclude someone from using it. On the other hand, if something is jointly owned, like a road, right? Street lights, defense. What about defense? Who owns defense, right? No private company owns it. It's a public good. Everyone gets the benefit out of that. the Pakistan army or whatever, right? So it's a public good. Either the property rights are not clearly defined or it is jointly owned by the people in a country. So you, as I was giving you the example, right, you can't stop someone from stepping on the road. You can't stop someone in your country from benefiting the defense services that it has. You can't stop someone from benefiting the street lights that the country has. And similarly, you can't stop someone from entering a park or public space, as I can say, right? Public space which is not owned by anyone, right? So these are all the things that are public goods because they are non-excludable. Then then another characteristic that is important here, rivalry. Now think about this. When the benefit of a product diminishes as more people use the good, that's known as rivalry. So I can only use my laptop. If I'm using my laptop, no one else can use it at the same time. If I'm using my car to go somewhere, most probably no one else would be able to use it at that time. Now that is rivalry. If more people start using the good, the benefit diminishes, right? In the case of non-rivalry, which are public goods, the benefit doesn't diminish. Even if more people are using the good, everyone will get more or less the same benefit. Now, quick questions, and then we'll move forward, right? So we did talk about the case of electricity yesterday, but let's talk about these cases so that we get a better idea. Now you have to think about these and tell me whether these are public goods or private goods, right? Uh, these are public goods or private goods, right? Okay, now let's first talk about the first one. So education is a private good. Education, what do you think? Students, just give me a guess, just make a guess knowing the characteristics that we have talked about. And then, so let's discuss one by one, right? So it's a private good. Zan is saying it's private good. Zohan is saying it's private good. Okay, okay. Now think about this. I want to spend some time to explain. Khadija and Khizr, kindly pay close attention, right? So this might be a new thing to you, but it shouldn't be difficult, right? So it's not, let's talk about why it makes you think it's a private good. To some extent, Zohan and Zen, you're right, that education can be excludable. How so? Right. It can be excludable because if someone is not paying for it, then you can remove the person from receiving the benefit, right? So let me explain you how from receiving the benefit, right? So whether it's a public school or a private school, you can tell whether that student has paid the fee or not. I repeat myself, whether it's a public school or a private school, by nature you can tell whether the person has paid, whether the student has paid the fee or not, right? So that being said, technically you can exclude a student who is not paying the fee, which private schools do, right? But obviously the public schools don't, right? Who is supplying the education if it's government? No, that's correct, Johan. Nothing about this. Again, if you use this argument, then all the discussion that we had over here will be useless. I repeat, right? So Zohan is saying that it depends who is providing education. To some extent, I do get what you're saying, because if education is provided by the public education would be non-excludable and non-rivalry, right? And private education will be excludable and rivalry. I guess that's what you meant, Zohan. But right now, we're just talking about the nature of the good. We're just talking about the nature of the good. Because think about this. I did say yesterday that electricity, I don't know about other countries, right? But electricity in Pakistan is produced by a government organization. But does that make it a public good? If electricity is being produced by government in Pakistan, does that make it a public good? And the answer to that was no, right? Because it's excludable and it's rivalry. We did discuss it yesterday. Now, similarly, right now, we're just discussing the nature of the good. We're just discussing the nature of the good, that can you even exclude someone? Can you even exclude someone from benefiting from education? So think about this, excluding someone from a road like excluding, telling someone to not step on a road is impossible. How? If someone is standing, you go and you say, this is my road. I mean, that doesn't make sense, right? You can't stop anyone, right? Similarly, you can't stop anyone from going to a park or, stepping in a public space, right? So by the very nature, parks, defense, street lights, these are public goods. But with education, the idea is that technically you can exclude. If a student is not paying the fee, you can make the student, you can take away the benefit of it. Like you can ask the student to pay for the fee and so on. Okay. Similarly, the other thing, right? If a classroom, now you will understand better, Zohan, is very crowded. So if a classroom is very crowded, will all students get quality education? Think about this. If there is a classroom that can accommodate 20, normally what is the average class size? What should be the average class size, right? 20, 25 students. But what if a classroom has 45 students? Would that be a problem? That's my question to you, right? Right, lower attention will be paid by the teacher and so on. So in a way, when there's more burden on the resources, and that is what happens in public schools, when there are more students in public school classrooms, right, at least in Pakistan, not sure about other countries, then it puts a pressure and not everyone is getting the same benefit. And the benefit diminishes. The more students you keep adding to a classroom, the benefit diminishes for the people. Why? Because then there's only one teacher and one teacher has to give attention to all those students, which is technically not possible. This is making sense, right? Right? So let's put it like this, right? So if there are so many students in a classroom, the teacher's attention will be diluted. Therefore, students will not get as much attention as much they could have in less crowded classrooms. And therefore, way addition of more students to classroom diminished the existing students' benefit. How many of you got this? Right? Is it making sense? So this is what makes education rivalry. Did you get my part? Did you get this? Right? So it's not like you can keep adding people to one classroom, right? You keep adding, right? Because the benefit diminishes, and that is what makes it rivalry. Got it? Khatija, Zain, Khizr, is everyone clear on this? Right? So that's the idea about it. So the thing at the end of the day, what economics says about education and healthcare, right? So these things, the discussion that we just had makes education private good, but still there is some aspects to it. There's some aspects to it which makes it a public good as well, right? So not to argue any further, right? Like not to make it confusing for the students of economics to understand whether it will be defined as public good or private good. So economic theory says that education is a quasi-public good. Quasi-public good means that it is somewhere in the middle of public and private good. It's somewhere in the middle of public and private good. Are you getting me? So it's not completely private like a cell phone. It's not completely private like a cell phone. It's not completely private like a car. It's not completely private like a laptop. But at the same time, it is also not public like defense. It's also not purely public like roads, right? Students, Khadija and Khizr, like quasi exact, right? Exact meaning I would need to check. Semi, apparently not really, seemingly, right? Being partly or almost, not exactly, but almost, right? Is it making sense? Right? So that's the reason why you can't say it's a pure public good. So there's a pure public good, right? So pure public goods are only four. Pure public goods public goods are, right? Students, are you following this? Pure public goods are parks, right? Street lights, defense, and roads. Lights, defense, and roads, right? Defense like military defense, right? Defense and roads, right? The other two are like the ones that I've just explained, right? So pure public goods, right? Okay. So these are the only four. Okay. Now, same is the argument for the healthcare, right? Perfect. So healthcare, think about this. Even in the case of healthcare, the same thing what happens in education, right? So technically, when you go to a hospital, the hospital people can stop you from getting the medical treatment unless you have paid for it. If you go to a hospital, right, any healthcare center, if you don't pay for it, technically they can stop you from taking that benefit, right? Make sense? So it is excludable to some extent, right? But the government hospitals obviously don't do that. Secondly, again, think about this. When there is a lot of pressure, when there's a lot of burden on public hospitals, right? Because there are so many people who are willing to take, who need medical attention, and there's so few resources in terms of the buildings or in terms of the doctors or in terms of the beds, then it puts a pressure, right, on those resources. And not everyone is getting the same health, health service that they should ideally. And we observed this very clearly during COVID days. Every country almost in the world faced this problem of emergency, health care emergency situation where there were not enough health professionals, there were not enough hospitals to accommodate so many people, because obviously no one imagined that everyone will be falling sick at the same time, because otherwise it doesn't happen, right? We don't all fall sick at the same time. How many of you are getting me? Street lights are costly then, right? Because they are installed in the street. So if, for example, 50 people can stand in the street, if the quantity of people in, okay, yeah, Zohan. So, I mean, first thing that I agree with you. If you go by that argument, I'll totally agree with you. But then the thing is, but then the thing is that why would 50 people in their sane state of mind would want to stand under one street light, simultaneously, until unless they are using that street light to study or do something else, right? But gone are those days, right? So I'm just joking about it. But yeah, I get it. If they are standing, technically the benefit diminishes then in any case. But even for the road. So what happens when there's traffic jam? Right? What happens on 15th of August in India, and what happens to 14th of August in Pakistan? It's Independence Day, people are out on the streets. And I mean, technically your benefit is being diminished because of other people on the road. But I mean, that's a rare situation. That's how I'll put it. Easy. Students, can we keep moving? Can you keep moving? Anything that's not clear? So for education and healthcare, we have said that these are quasi public goods. These are quasi public good, right? And these other things are very simple to identify. Clothes are private goods, drinking water is private good, food is private good, electricity is private good, cell phone is a private good, car and laptop are private good. Any confusion so far? Khizr, Khadija? Okay, perfect. Very nice, very nice. Easy. Okay, now let's keep moving, students. Now, we do know that the first type of economic system that we're about to discuss is mixed economy, right? Now, in mixed economy, government produces public goods and private sector produces private goods. Okay. Now, then what is the role of private sector, right? Think about this. So the first question, in mixed economy, the first question that we're about to discuss. Okay. In fact, if you just give me a second, and you can also see my screen, I have some very interesting notes related to this. So instead of me doing all this, just a second, let me open that. Okay, now my question to you is, in mixed economy, what type of products will the private sector produce? In mixed economy, what type of products will the private sector produce? In mixed economy, where there's both public sector and private sector, right? So what type of goods? Yeah. Which government is not producing, example, luxury cars. Okay, fine, fine. So just give me a second. Let me find that. Okay. Okay, mixed economy. Mixed economy, command economy, free market. Okay, perfect. So here are the notes. Okay, we'll come to it once we are there. Okay, now students, think about this. If in a mixed economy, there's both public and private sector. Now, most economies, before we proceed any further, let me tell you that most economies in the world are mixed economy. You'll see presence of both public and private sector. You'll see presence of both public and private sector, right? Now, let's first talk about the role of private sector. Now, what is private sector doing in your country? Just imagine about all the private businesses that you see in your country. So in Pakistan, and that's true for other countries as well, private sector produces. So the first question that we have to address, right? What to produce, right? These are the three questions, right? That we have to answer: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Yes or no? Right? For whom? Okay. Now, for the first question, the private sector answer is very simple. What Zohan has already said: anything that is private, that is profitable. Now, think about this. Obviously, we do see private businesses sometimes doing some charity and social work, but that is not very frequent. That's not very frequent. Why? Because that's not their main objective. Their main objective is simply to make profit out of whatever they do. Am I making sense or not, students? So what we are doing right now, that we are discussing that how the private sector in mixed economy will answer these questions. What to produce, right? The answer is simple: anything that's profitable. So all the restaurants that you go to, all the shopping malls that you go to, right? They are selling those products because it's profitable. If that wouldn't have been profitable, they would have never produced this. As simple as that. So why am I teaching at Mega Lecture? Why Mega Lecture even exists is because it's a profitable business. Otherwise, by now we would have died off. Am I making sense to you guys or not? Right? How to produce. How to produce, if you remember, I said that what type of resources you're using to produce. What type of resources you're using to produce. Now, what's the answer to that? What's the answer to that? Yeah. So private sector decides resources on the basis of what? Who can answer me? So when private sector has to decide whether they should hire labor or capital or something of the sort, what factors will a private business consider? Yeah. Is this making sense or not?
Sir, question repeat kar sakte hain?
Yes. So we are answering the second question, right? How to produce. So the question is that for private sector, when it has to answer how to produce, like what resources to use to produce something, what things will it consider to decide whether to use labor or to use capital? Are you getting? Will private business be more interested in using machinery, or would private business be more interested in using labor? Let's answer it in as simple words as that. For which the output is maximum. Interesting, right? So in simple words, yes, Johan, that's correct. So I don't have a preference. If I'm running a private business, I will see which input is cheapest, right? Maximizes output and produces low, and it is low cost, right? Zwan, your point is also very important because productivity is important. But let's not confuse the new students here. So students, think about this. The private sector will employ resources that are cheapest, right? Will employ resources that are cheapest given quality of output, assuming, right? So we are making the assuming that the quality of output is constant. Okay, now think about this. Do you remember I gave you this example in the first class? Why why in Pakistan and other developing countries like Pakistan, we use more labor intensive techniques. So why you see so many, manufacturing in Pakistan is generally, not all of it, but I'm just giving you an example that uses more labor, right? Agriculture in Pakistan uses more people, right? People are manually, cutting the crops, they're manually sowing seeds and all that stuff. So what is the reason? Why do we see people doing all of this work? Whereas in other parts of the world, like USA, Europe, you see all the machines being used. So there has to be a reason for that. And what's the reason? Machinery is expensive in Pakistan. In other simple words, labor is much cheaper compared to capital, compared to machines, right? Is it making sense? So coming back to the point, if we assume for now that machinery produces the same output, that same quality of output that the labor can produce, then private business would want to go for the resource that is cheaper, because that saves them cost. Because if cost is less, then what will happen? If the cost is less, what will happen? Students, do you know the formula of profit? You know the formula of profit? What is profit? Profit is the money that I save at the end of the day. So what profit? Profit is the amount of money that Mega Lecture saves at the end of the day. So let's say if Mega Lecture charges 5,000 rupees. So I'm just giving you a very simple example. So if a student is being charged 5,000 rupees, right, on Mega Lecture, and the salary, like the teacher salary that we have to pay, the electricity bill that we have to pay, and all that stuff. So the total cost for teaching that one student costed 3,000 rupees. Students, are you following me or not, right? So if a student was charged 5,000 rupees at Mega Lectures, and the total cost of, of educating that kid or teaching that kid was 3,000 in terms of the teacher salaries, the rent, electricity, and all those things that we had to pay. How much profit we made at the end of the day? So we saved 2,000 rupees. That is the owner's profit. Whoever is the owner of the business, right? He or she makes that much money. Easy, simple. Are we good? So you would want to minimize your cost so that you can make more profit. That's the reason for that. As simple as that. Because what is the ultimate objective? We do know that the ultimate objective of private business is to maximize profit. Did we discuss this or not? And now comes in the last question: for whom to produce? So the goods that is produced by the private sector, who gets to buy that? Who gets to buy that? Exactly, the people who have the affordability, right? The people with affordability. Have you ever seen KFC? Have you ever seen KFC and McDonald's selling, giving away food for free? Have you ever seen Pepsi or Coca-Cola, being distributed for free? So the answer to those questions is no. Reason being, they're profit-making entities. They will sell their product as much as someone wants to buy, as long as they can pay for it, right? Are you getting me, right? So if I go to the shop and today I want to order 2,000 cans of Coca-Cola, 2,000 cans of Coca-Cola, would they refuse me? Would they refuse me if I go to a shop and I want to buy, right? No, right? As long as I can pay, they don't really care what I do with that product. Whether I drink it, I distribute it for free, they don't care. They have gotten their money. So but if I cannot afford a can, they will not even give me one, because that's how it works, right? It's a paid thing. So the people with affordability will be able to buy the good only, right? So, Khizr and Khatija, I ask you guys because I want to make sure you are on the same page with the other students, right? Is it making sense? So we are talking about mixed economy. Within mixed economy, we said it's presence of both public and private sector. So public sector is producing public goods, private sector is producing private goods, right? So first of all, we focused on the discussion of private goods. So what are the three questions that any economy needs to answer? We have already discussed this. What to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce. So what to produce answer for private sector is simple: anything that is profitable. So anything that is profitable for private sector, that is what they will produce. They will produce food, clothes, even education, even healthcare, even laptops, cars, anything. But that has to be profitable. Anything that's not profitable, they don't produce. Simple, right? They even produce demerit goods. Do you know? You know what demerit goods are? Let's quickly discuss this, right? So another classification of goods, right? Because that's also part of our syllabus, right? So we discussed about, just like we discussed about public and private goods, public versus private goods. Similarly, we're about to look at we are about to look at merit versus demerit good, right? So demerit goods are goods that are harmful for the consumers, right? What are those products? Tobacco, cigarettes, right? They are overproduced and overconsumed, right? So demerit goods, anything that's harmful for the consumers, but they do not fully realize the harmful effect. Effect, and therefore they overconsume it, right? As simple as that. So example would be simple. Think about this. A lot of people consume cigarette, alcohol, right? Right. So these are all demerit goods, even junk food to some extent, right? Fast food is not that healthy as per the research, right? Alcohol, blah, 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 right? We go on this. Okay. Now, what are merit goods? Merit goods are the opposite of that, right? So goods that are beneficial for consumers like education and healthcare, but people underconsume because they do not fully value it, right? So for they underconsume because they do not fully realize the benefits, right? What could be the examples? Take parts. Every time we fall sick, sometimes we don't feel like going to, to get ourselves checked up. Sometimes we do not fully realize the benefit of education and things like that, right? So, perfect example of that could be education, healthcare, right? Are you getting me? Okay. Now, these are merit goods, right? Even exercise, healthy eating, healthy food, right? Exercise, right? So, these are all merit goods. Okay. Good on this, students. Any confusion, anything that's not clear so far, right? Okay. So what was the idea? The private sector will produce anything that's profitable, even demat goods. We see all the cigarette companies, alcohol companies, these are private companies. We know this, right? How to produce? They will employ resources that are cheapest. So that's something that you need to remember, right? So they'll go for something that is cheapest. Okay. For whom to produce? Anyone with the affordability. So if you can't afford that product, they will not sell that to you, right? Easy, we got on this. Now let's quickly move on and discuss the role of government in the mixed economy. Mixed economy, right? By the students, I will highly appreciate if all of you can, just quickly say yes or, clear or something of the sort so that I get a better idea that you're all understanding it, right? Are you getting me? And if there's any question, any even small doubt that you feel, just ask me there and then, right? And I'll answer you in detail because I do know that there can be some confusion, right? So don't hesitate to throw your questions there and then. Okay. Now, what is the role of government in the mixed economy? Again, I'm copy pasting from here because these are the three questions again that the government has to answer, right? So what are the three questions that the government will be answering, but obviously, as I said, the answers will be different. The questions are the same, but the answers are different, right? Yes or no? Okay. Now, for the first question, what to produce? So we already know the answer to this, that the government in public sector in mixed economy will produce public goods only, right? Like defense, right? Who provides defense in a country? Obviously, government. Who provides street lights, roads, parks, right? So that's the first thing. How to produce. Now comes in the question how to produce. So what do you think? What type of resources will the government want to use? Right? Yeah, and obviously merit goods as well. Thank you for adding that up. Not only the public goods, thank you, Zan, and also public goods, because we know that, oh, sorry, not only public goods but also merit goods, right? Because we know private sector will not provide as much merit good as much it should. Because think about this, private schools will never want to teach everyone. Why? Because some people, poor people who can't afford it, that's not a profitable thing for the private sector, so they'll not want to obviously teach the poor kids of poor families. Similarly, private hospitals would not want to treat poor people because they can't pay them high prices, right? So to help those people, and more than help, to make sure that everyone gets some at least basic level of education and healthcare, it is the public schools and the public hospitals that will provide that service. Is it simple? So there are two products that the government is producing in a mixed economy: the public goods, which are non-excludable, non-rivalry, as we discussed, plus merit goods, because merit goods will not be affordable for everyone by the private sector. Easy? Any confusion? From which the society will benefit? It can be labor intensive. Right. Right. Exactly. So the answer to the second question, students, how to produce. How to produce, the government objective is to employ as many people as much it can. Right? So the government is always trying to have more employment levels, because just imagine if someone is unemployed, that person is dependent on the government, and then that can lead to social problems like high crime rates. Are you getting me? Right? So government is not thinking about like the private sector, because private sector is strictly about profit maximization. They will try to minimize their costs. They will only want to hire people who are most most efficient and productive. But government thinks in a slightly different manner. So in the question of how to produce, the government will try creating more jobs, and in the process they are more likely to be labor intensive. Now, this is a new word for you. Some of you might not be familiar with labor intensive. Labor intensive means when you're using more labor rather than machines. You're using more labor rather than machines, right? So since the government objective is to provide people employment, right? Because obviously then otherwise, if not, then these people become dependent on the government, and they might also get involved in bad activities, crime and stuff like that. So government try to employ these people, as many people as much it can, right? And then comes in the last question: for whom to produce, right? So the distribution of goods, right, is not on the basis of affordability, but instead on the basis of need, right? Students, did you get this question? Right? Uh, from which society will benefit, right? Yeah, I did not get your questions on. What do you mean when you said everyone, right? So the distribution of public and merit goods produced by the government, right, is not on the basis of affordability, but instead on the basis of need. Are you getting me, right? So it's not that you can go to public school or you can go to public hospital on the basis of whether you can afford that service or not, but that is on the basis of if you need it, government will entertain you. As I was giving you the example, in COVID, everyone was getting sick, and the government provided free vaccination produced for everyone in the government. Right? Yeah, technically everyone, but it's only the most deserving people who avail those services. Zwan, why don't you all go to public schools? Because obviously the quality is not that good. No one who can afford it, right? I don't go. I don't take a metro bus, right? So rich people automatically choose to not opt for it. Rich people who have more affordability automatically choose not to opt for it, right? So students, the time is about to end, so I will send you the link of this document. Kindly have a look at it before coming to tomorrow's class, and then we'll continue from here. And please, I'm saying it again, do ask me as many questions in the class as much, especially if there's a doubt, right?